Oh,
instant
Pat.
reaction show. Myself, Pat Forde, with Bryan Fischer. We also do the podcast, Others Receiving Votes, with Gene Wojciechowski. We're here to talk about the latest CFP rankings. The next to last before the last, right? Not the penultimate, but the one before that, whatever phrase that may be. Apologies for the delay getting started here. It's been planes, trains, and automobiles for me getting across the country, but I have now ensconced myself where we can do this. Bryan, you've had a chance to really fully digest this. What's your big takeaways from the rankings here?
Well, number one, the comment by Hunter Yurachek that Miami and Notre Dame were finally compared against each other, and Miami obviously moving up into the rankings. They were number 12 this week. They slide ahead of Utah. Notre Dame's sitting there at number 9, but I think it was notable that Hunter Yurachek, that seems to be the debate that we've been having for a couple weeks now. What would happen, Miami versus Notre Dame? Well, we finally are seeing them compared to one another, and guess what? The committee likes Notre Dame better, and so it seems like that head-to-head result at the beginning of the year again continues to not matter in that discussion between the Canes and the Irish. And I think that was one of the bigger takeaways on top of Hunter Yurachek, also on the ESPN show. At least we'll see. He's still doing his teleconference right now with the rest of the media, and he can maybe go into this a little bit deeper. But kind of saying the committee has not discussed Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss at all, which was notable given that the Rebels dropped a spot behind Oregon.
Yeah, that stuck out to me. Oregon moves up one, Mississippi moves down one. And whether this presents the possibility for a slippery slope for Ole Miss to slide out of having a home game in the first round of the playoff. First of all, they have to beat Mississippi State
Yeah.
on Friday. But even if they do that, is there a chance that they back up out of the top 8 if Lane Kiffin's not going to be the coach? And I think we were among the first people to discuss this possibility last week about what happens if Lane Kiffin isn't the coach and whether that affects their ranking. That's something the committee, whether they're going to admit or not, they will certainly be talking about, depending what happens this week. If Lane Kiffin says he's staying, great. If Lane Kiffin says he's leaving and he's not going to coach the playoff, big issue for them to discuss. So we will see what happens there. But it's interesting to me. I think head to head, it's a little bit tricky to put Oregon ahead of them when Ole Miss's resume, they have beaten Oklahoma on the road, and Oklahoma is a playoff team. They beat Tulane by 35 points. Tulane might end up being a playoff team. Their loss is by 8 points on the road to Georgia, which is a playoff team. And you look at Oregon, on the other hand, their loss is to a playoff team, Indiana, but it was at home. They don't have any wins over any playoff teams. Their best win was, I guess, Saturday against USC, and they beat them pretty handily, 15 points. I was there in Autzen. But resume-wise, I look at these two, and I personally think I would keep Mississippi ahead of Oregon unless or until things change with the Rebels and who's coaching them.
Well, I think the interesting question, and we'll see, ultimately what the committee decides to do. But if you do look into their principles, the thing that is listed on their website, they say other relevant factors, such as availability of key players or coaches that may affect a team's performance during the season or likely will affect its postseason performance, will be considered. That's part of their principles. That's part of the thing that they have to consider. I don't think anybody's saying toss the Rebels out of the playoff. I think, like you mentioned, with that resume, this is a good team, a team worthy of being in the playoff this year. Nobody's debating that. But when it comes to the potential debate over whether they get a home game or not, especially given the logjam of teams right kind of around where they're ranked right now, I think it's a very relevant debate. Is this team going to play as well as we think they are without their head coach, without their obviously primary play caller in Lane Kiffin, the guy that has kind of been stirring this whole drink this last couple of weeks leading into the Egg Bowl? I think it's a relevant topic. And as much as the committee likes to say, oh, we don't want to deal with hypotheticals, well, guess what? They're going to have to deal with hypotheticals after the Egg Bowl. It's going to start on Saturday. It is going to continue through Conference Championship week. And that's going to be the big thing, I think, over not just is Ole Miss going to get in. I think nobody's debating that. I think it's just where is that seating? Because if you're a Notre Dame fan right now, and the possibility of going on the road to play in Norman in a pretty cold environment, very hostile crowd there, versus getting a home game possibly against this Ole Miss team, I think that's a pretty big difference, not only for the Irish, but for the Rebels going on the road too.
Yeah, there's a lot of drama right there on the fault line of home versus road first round. There's obviously drama about who's getting in as well, but I think we start with that is, uh, you know, 5 through 8. Who are they? 9 through 12. Who are they? I think we're pretty sure 11 and 12 are going to come from outside of the top 12, and that's going to be relatively easy. But deciding between the 10th team, the last real top 12 team, versus the next team, whoever's out, is going to be hard. And then, yeah, we'll see. Now, again, Lane Kiffin can render all of this moot if he says, I am the coach at Ole Miss in perpetuity. Let's go. We don't know whether he's going to do that. We don't know anything at this point. And we don't know, first of all, first thing first, win the Egg Bowl. Secondly, who's the coach? So those are the two things the committee can sit back and at least wait and say, let's see those things happen, and then we'll make some decisions.
Although I will say, look, if you're Old Miss at this point, and it's even a consideration, why are we doing this whole ultimatum process saying that he's not going to coach? We've already seen it right now in terms of North Texas. They just hired Eric Morris, or Oklahoma State just hired North Texas head coach Eric Morris, and he's going to stay with the team throughout the playoff, until their run continues, whether that's in the American Championship, whether they lose this weekend. He's going to stay with the team throughout the run. And I get the optics not being great for the Rebels in terms of having the LSU coach or the Florida coach being your guy. But this is a playoff run. This is a team that if they get a couple of breaks, they could win the national title. You know what? And if you win the national title, you're going to say, all right, happy trails. We'll see you. And we're going to raise the banner. And there won't be no statue outside of Vaught Hemingway with Lane Kiffin out there. It'll be this team itself. And maybe it's Trinidad Chambliss holding up the trophy, and that's what gets put up out there. So that to me is the whole thing. If you're Ole Miss, you're almost forcing the decision. Think of how much money they could be leaving on the table from hosting one of those home playoff games. The scene at the Grove there, to put that into peril just because you're angry at your head coach at this point, who you signed up to hire, who you signed up knowing that this possibility could be out there, knowing that he's Lane Kiffin. This is the part of the Kiffin experience. You got to sign up for the whole thing. And so don't put that home playoff game at stake and in jeopardy if you're gonna hire Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, if this really all right, so obviously a lot of things have to happen here. But if Lane Kiffin really says he's leaving, but still wants to coach, and you say, no, forget it, we want an Ole Miss guy to coach this team, you are further undercutting your team already, right? Yes. And a home game, a home college football playoff game in Oxford, Mississippi could arguably be the biggest sporting event in the history of the state. And you want to punt that because you're mad at the guy that's the coach? That would be purely a vanity and ego play, as opposed to doing what is right for this team in this season. And look, I think what is right for this team in this season is for Lane Kiffin to coach him. In an ideal world, he doesn't leave at all. He says, this is the timing of the world right now. I'm committed to this team. I'm keeping this job. I'm coaching them. If worst comes to worst, if I'm leaving after the season, I'm still coaching them through the playoff. And if Ole Miss can't go along with that, shame on them. And if Lane Kiffin says I'm leaving before the playoffs, shame on him. And then the whole thing's just a damn shame. But we will see where we get with this thing. What else? I'm trying to look here at the rankings. What else jumped out, if anything? The Utah dropping behind Miami. I look at that and say, Utah's near-death experience against Kansas State, who's not a very good team, probably cost the Utes there. But it is significant that Miami now moves into, and this is one of these dumb things the committee comes up with. Well, you have to be within 4 for us to compare the teams, or a quadrant or whatever. That's ridiculous. But now they are in the quadrant with Notre Dame. So what do you think got Miami ahead of Utah, and what pushed Utah down, Bryan?
Yeah, it was probably more not what Miami did to Virginia Tech this past weekend, but probably more seeing that Utes defense give up so many yards. I mean, nearly 500 yards, and you end up miraculously winning that game. I mean, yes, it was a testament to Utah and what they were able to overcome, but you should not have been in that position if you harbor those at-large hopes of being in the playoff. All right. Well, you should not be giving up that amount of yards, that amount of points to a Kansas State team that is fighting for a bowl right now. You know, they go into this week in 5-6, and so they're fighting just merely to make a bowl. And I think that was probably more the case of flipping those two teams. Honestly, you know, you could probably make the case for Miami versus BYU, and that's going to be a more interesting discussion, I think, going in after this coming week, given that one of those two teams might be playing in the Big 12 title game in BYU, and Miami's going to be done. So I think that's going to be more interesting if Miami can get some additional style points, not only creep a little bit closer to Notre Dame on that screen to where maybe you are just separated by an Alabama team that could lose each of the next 2 weeks between the Iron Bowl or potentially in the SEC championship game, then things get a lot more interesting. I think if you're Miami, so it's notable that they're still rising. And you know, Hunter Yurchek, the committee chair on ESPNU, he kind of said, "Look, we're respecting what Miami is. They're getting back to the team that we kind of saw early in the year. If they can continue to do that." You go back to what former chairman Mac Rhodes kept saying. They wanted to see some consistency out of Miami, starting to see it a little bit more. We'll see against Pitt, a team that is right now Notre Dame's best win, you know, or second best win out there in terms of number 22 Pitt. That will have that common point of comparison between the two. So that'll be another data point for the committee to move forward with in terms of this whole Miami debate and where they stack up.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me that the teams that are quote unquote on the bubble, on either the right side of the bubble or the wrong side. If you're on the right side, you've got games this weekend that probably can't hurt you very much. They could help you very much. They could only hurt you. Oklahoma's playing an LSU team that's pretty well packed it in. Ole Miss is playing a 5-6 Mississippi State team. Notre Dame is playing a bad Stanford team. Alabama's playing a 5-6 Auburn team. On the outside, Miami is on the road at Pitt. That's a game that could help them if they win it. Vanderbilt is on the road at Tennessee, ranked opponent. You win that, that could help you. Michigan obviously is playing number 1 Ohio State. That could help you. Texas is playing Texas A&M. So, out of that group, Bryan, out of that group that is outside trying to get in, who do you think with a victory might have the best chance of cracking the bracket?
That's a good question. Well, obviously, you know, you could consider Michigan sitting there at number 15, which seems to be a bit of a death spot, given the number of times the number 15 team has ended up losing the following Saturday after the ranking. So I will always keep that in mind. But if you consider Michigan and the impact that they're going to have on the entire field if they beat Ohio State on Saturday, you know, you're talking about leapfrogging Vanderbilt. You're talking about leapfrogging the Big 12 teams, and you're talking about probably leapfrogging Miami because you would have the best win out of anybody in the country. So I think if you're, you know, Michigan, that gives you a little bit of hope, especially that you passed Texas, which obviously has another big game against another top 4 opponent this week. That kind of almost blocks Texas, I think, from rising in terms of what they would be able to do, and potentially make it into the field as an at-large team at 9-3. That's just too much ground to make up at this point. So I would kind of say Michigan if they get the win, but the other thing that out there is probably Vanderbilt. You know, I think if you're finishing there in the SEC at 10-2, you have a close loss in Austin and a close loss in Tuscaloosa. And remember that late touchdown pass, Pat, I think you were there for Alabama that made that score a little bit more
Yeah,
than it probably should
yeah.
have been.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that maybe that comes into play for Vanderbilt. If they're really going back and looking at some of these games, they were very competitive in all of their games. They've really been on a roll these last couple of weeks. If they go in to a number 19 Tennessee team and blow them out in Neyland at in mid afternoon, that could send a message to the committee as well that they could be on that cut line, especially if there's some chaos in championship weekend.
Yeah, that the end of the Vandy Alabama game, if this comes down to a real scrubbing of details, needs to be looked at because they're losing by 9 points, 23-14. And they could have run the ball, punted the ball, and just been done with the game with a 9-point loss. They went for a fourth down. They didn't get it. They gave Alabama the ball in their territory. Alabama breaks the play and scores a touchdown, certainly in the last minute, maybe even like the last 20 seconds. That kind of made that score look a little bit different. So I am now, I've decided while we've been talking about this, I am absolutely rooting for Miami to win, Vanderbilt to win, Michigan to win, and Texas to win, just to have the mother of all log jams among 2 loss teams and a 3 loss Texas thrown in there. And the committee has to figure out what the heck are we doing with them vis-a-vis BYU, Alabama, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Mississippi, especially if Mississippi should lose. Oh, baby. There could be a
Oh,
lot of stuff happening there.
yeah, I mean, I go through bowl projections every Sunday, and I do kind of try to sit and look at the teams and project out, obviously. And I did go through a few of those scenarios, and it just broke my brain. So good luck to the committee. If there's a massive upset this weekend, and there's just a glut of teams, and I know we got a couple of questions. Go ahead if you're joining us on any of the social platforms. Be sure to drop your comments in there. We'll try to get to as many as we can here in the next couple of minutes. I think we got one from Adam Kelly, I believe. Explain how Vanderbilt is behind Utah after blowing out Kentucky, given all the metrics, and why is Vanderbilt being penalized for their strength of record when others are being rewarded? That's a good question. I don't understand why. I think it's just the respect that Utah has garnered from the committee itself over this entire process. I think for the last couple of weeks, I mean, they've been a team that the committee has said, look, we really like Utah. No matter what we've seen on the field, no matter who they've played, in terms of the top 25 wins, they don't have a whole lot, especially now that Cincinnati's out of the ranking, some of the other Big 12 teams that they've beaten. Obviously, Arizona State's in there, but there's certainly a backup quarterback situation. Utah, their resume looks pretty thin. And look, I've seen the Utah up close in person. I do think they're a good team, but in terms of playoff caliber, which is what the committee is saying they are kind of in that cut line right now, I'm a little more questionable in terms of their future endeavors in terms of being an actual playoff contender moving forward.
I agree. I don't quite get the Utah thing. Their losses are good losses, but they're losses. Lost
Yeah.
by 24 at home to Texas Tech in a game that was close, and then they got kind of avalanched at the end. They lost to BYU and Provo. But yeah, where are the wins there? You mentioned ASU, but ASU has had injury situations, and the rest of the Big 12, I'm sorry, it's not there. They beat UCLA to open the season. UCLA is no good. We
Yeah.
know that. So I would put Vanderbilt ahead of Utah without a doubt. That to me is very interesting from the committee. I just don't quite get the Utah thing. But it's great to get questions. We have an interested Vanderbilt fan base. This is
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
It's never really happened at this stage of the season. So we've got angry Vandy fans out there. I was on a plane. I flew into Atlanta with a bunch of Georgia Tech fans. They're wearing their gear. They're talking about the game Friday against Georgia. This is beautiful. That's what the playoff has done, is it at least expanded interest to fan bases that usually at this time of year are thinking about something else. So good stuff. What else do we got here? We got some other questions. Here's a. Do we want to go ahead and throw one up there, Doug? There we go. Dustin Bridges. Why should a 2-loss team get a home game over a 1-loss team? That's the stupid crap I have ever heard. Liberal mouthpiece and clearly 2 pieces of crap. This is a great question. Great question. I don't even know what exactly he's referring to there. So I think we can do better than that one.
Well, I will say that there is certainly a chance. I do look at Oklahoma, and that being kind of that's obviously the cut line in terms of the last team to get a home playoff game. And again, if we go back to the Lane Kiffin scenario, there's a possibility that they end up leapfrogging, an Ole Miss, and not, there is going to be a bit of a head-to-head comparison between those two teams, and it'll be interesting to hear the committee debate between those. And obviously, you can't have Ole Miss right behind Oklahoma. There's got to have to be some sort of a buffer. So if you're dropping Ole Miss because of the Lane Kiffin situation, it's going to have to be behind Notre Dame. Like that's the only way it makes sense. And so you're talking about a potentially 1-loss Ole Miss that just won the Egg Bowl, but they don't have their head coach. And they're going to be behind an Oklahoma team that is, we'll say they've struggled at times this year offensively. Great on defense. Nobody's taking away what that Brent Venables defense. A Notre Dame team that is the topic for debate this year in terms of what's going on with them in Miami. And then maybe you have to keep them ahead of an Alabama team that would have way better wins than what Ole Miss would have, but a lot more losses. So I think it's one of those scenarios where the committee is probably not going to win either way, no matter what ends up happening.
Well, and that, you know what? That's part and parcel of college football. It's been that way for 100 years, maybe longer. You can go back, and I did this actually when I was when it looked like Georgia might three-peat. It was going back to when Minnesota kind of had a three-peat, although one of them was before there was actually an AP poll, I believe. So that was a little bit iffy, but still, there were debates then. People in the Midwest saying they had the best teams, and people, and sports writers in the East Coast saying, "Nah, your teams aren't that good," and back and forth, and it's just proceeded from there. And every time we've come closer and closer to getting a good system, and I think we have one now. Frankly, with 12 teams, I'm sorry. Yes, there are hard decisions. So what? I don't care. I'm unbothered by difficult decisions on who's 12 and who's 13, who's 10 and who's 11, that sort of thing. That comes with the territory. College football's always had arguments. It's always has controversy. It used to be one versus two without playing each other. Then it was top two, and then who's third didn't get a chance to play in the BCS. And then we had a 4-team playoff, and whoever was fifth was getting left out, and that was a travesty. This is better. Whoever's getting left out of this, I am relatively sure would not win the national title if they got in. Maybe it could be that it could happen, but I'm willing to believe that 12 teams is enough. I think we'll end up with 16 eventually. I don't know when. Maybe that'll make people happier, but then we'll probably still have 17 ranked. The 17th ranked team will be ticked off about not being in. So
No, that's all it is moving the debate, and which would be fascinating this year. All right, if we look at that, all right, who's the 16th team? Texas, number 17, USC. That would be an interesting debate. Virginia would be number 18, potentially being in the ACC championship game. So, yes, it moves the cut line if we were to go to 16. I'm not necessarily saying that Michigan, as it stands now with their resume, is necessarily national championship tournament worthy, if you will. Obviously, Texas has had their struggles. Maybe talent wise, they would be in consideration. Certainly, USC, if they didn't lose that game earlier in the year where they were on the road against Illinois and allowed the old backdoor touchdown there at the very end in the final few minutes, maybe they would be a little bit more worthy. But that's the issue with the current system. And frankly, if they expand, that's where the debate is going to be. We wouldn't be talking about Miami, Notre Dame. We would be talking about the likes of USC and Michigan and others. So, some good questions too coming up into the chat. It looks like I can't read that, but does it say think that we will stay at 12 teams or 20?
Yeah, Findetta wants to know: will we stay at 12 teams or get up to say 20? I don't think. I think it's 16, and then there's people that want like 24. I mean,
You can just
maybe
say the
20.
Big Ten. The Big Ten wants
Yes,
24.
the Big Ten. Although we'll see whether they're winning people over to their side to say more bids for you, whatever. But I mean, I think the debate is 16 versus something larger like a 24, and I uh I 16, fine. Fine if we need to do 16, but 24 to me would just be ridiculous and stupid. And it would be the same thing as a 76 team NCAA tournament. It would only exist to make coaches and athletic directors feel like they've done more than they've actually done by saying, look, we got in the playoff. And I don't think anybody is really going to be fooled into thinking because you're the 24th team in a 24 team playoff that you're some sort of special team. That's just my thought.
Well, and then we got another question about James Madison, which kind of I'll dovetail that into this because you look at what a 2014 playoff would end up being. All right, you'd have Tulane in there, sure, or the American champion if you want to throw in North Texas there. You'd have James Madison, sure, but you'd also have let's see, number 20 Arizona State is in the rankings. All right, Arizona State with their backup quarterback, been banged up all year, and look, Kenny Dillingham's done a great job. Have the potential to get to 9 wins in the Territorial Cup this Friday, but is that really a playoff caliber team? Is that why we are expanding this playoff? Is so that Arizona State can get a shot to potentially extend their season another game, sure, but end up losing by 15 or 20 to some SEC team on the road? Like, is that
Yeah.
really furthering the sport right now? So I think
No.
when we talk about the playoff expansion, I don't think that gets thought of enough, and especially in a certain Big Ten office right now. That yeah, it's great in theory that you're going to expand the playoff, you're going to involve more teams, but the quality of those teams. I mean, it's tough right now in terms of that debate with when we were just talking about 16. Like, does Texas really need to be in given how they've played against the likes of Kentucky, and barely making it out over overtime against Kentucky at this point? No. Like, I mean, there needs to be a cut line at some point, and
Yeah.
I don't think the commissioners are listening to that, or they're not watching either.
No, they're not. They're absolutely not. And all they are thinking about is money, TV, and what's going to make our people sound like we're successful. And, the Big Ten via expansion is basically trying to bribe some of these other conferences. Like, look, yes, more bids. We will make sure you get more bids. And there's no need to me. Yes, you know what? Arizona State, there is a game for you. It's like the Holiday Bowl or
Yeah.
some other bowl game, the Texas Bowl. It's not a playoff game. Go play the bowl game. We've heard over and over and over, we're going to destroy the bowl system. Well, this actually would. You go to 24 teams, you're really taking a hammer to the bowl system then. And while I am not a big bowl proponent, I mean, if you want to have a bowl system that's something other than the TransPerfect New Orleans Bowl and the whatever Mobile Bowl is nowadays, and some of these other ones, then save some of those games too.
Well, and maybe we're too involved in watching college football, but man, in the middle of December on some random Wednesday or Thursday night, I want to watch those games.
Sure.
Like, and I want to see those. It's great for the kids on those teams to be able to go to play, not only play another extra game if they want to. Some of them are jumping into the portal. Some of them are removing themselves because of injury. Some of them are training for the draft. I get that. But for the guys, maybe they didn't get to play a lot this season. For them to have a chance to go somewhere else, play another team, maybe see another part of the country they haven't seen, go get those bowl gifts, that they can bring back to their family members or whatnot. Like, it's a great experience. And like, taking that away, because make no doubt about it, the move to expand the playoff, whether it's 16 or 24, is going to impact the bowl system in some form. A lot of these bowls are going to go away. Some of them we've already seen struggle at this point, and that's a bummer. As someone who loves watching a lot of those bowl games, throughout the month of December into January, to where you can kind of get that extra little bit of dose before we hit the long off season, where there's no more football until August.
Yeah, got a question here. Do y'all think Notre Dame needs to join a conference already? No, I mean that's been settled. Notre Dame is not joining a conference
Yeah.
unless something changes drastically. If we have a Big Ten SEC Super League and they feel like they need to be part of that, that's the only thing that's changing that. Nothing else. Why should they? Look at their situation. They're 10
Yeah, I mean,
and 2. They don't have to play a 13th game. They are absolutely going to the playoff. All they got to do is beat Stanford, and you're going to get what you want. So that if Notre Dame has no reason to change its situation.
I mean, if you think about it, that holding call there at the end against Texas A&M, and
The non-holding call,
the non-holding call. Excuse me, sorry about that. The non-holding call that cost them that game against Texas A&M in the end. You thought if they had ended up winning that game, number one, we'd look at Texas A&M pretty differently. But Notre Dame would probably be in line for a bye at this point. I
Yeah.
think they'd probably be ahead of Georgia, given what we've seen, and you talk about breaking some people's brains. Notre Dame getting the quarterfinal bye into the Sugar Bowl or the Cotton Bowl or wherever, the year after everything just happened with all the discussion about seeding and all the seeding changes. That would definitely break some people's brains. And look, you know what? Maybe they're joined on that independent train, given some of the talk we've heard these last couple of weeks out of Michigan and USC. Maybe everybody's realizing that football independence is actually coming back into vogue.
Yeah. It's not a bad way to go if you can pull it off from a TV contract standpoint. The other thing with that Notre Dame Texas A&M game, which I was at, is, I mean, Tyler Buckner in year 100 of playing college football was the holder and dropped an extra point snap that would have given them 41, and Texas A&M would have been playing to tie, not to win on the last drive. So there's a lot that happened in that game, a lot, and it's a 1-point game, and so you can look back and say, what about this? What about that? Again, that's college football, man. That's part of the deal. Adam Kelly, question: if Tulane's coach says they're average, shouldn't there be some fluidity with that automatic G5 spot, or just disregard it altogether? What the Tulane coach John Sumrall is saying was purely to motivate his team. It has nothing to do with how he thinks they are as a college football playoff team. Certainly, I think if you asked John, hey, are you guys worthy of a bid? He would say, yes, we are. That was we're not playing very well. We had a bad practice. I need to light a fire under some guys sort of moment. As far as the automatic G5, I'm still fully in favor of an automatic G5 spot. And there's going to be a push. I will say this. I talked to Greg Sankey at the Georgia Texas game, and he brought up, without anybody asking him, if we're going to have a situation where the best G5 teams aren't even making the top 25, we need to rethink that. And that to me was a shot across the bow of, oh yeah, we may well take that spot away. There's at least a possibility, which I think would be a travesty and would get back to some of the problems that we have in college football. But keep an eye on that. The American champion better be in the top 25, or James Madison, whoever is the highest seeded one or highest ranked one, had better be in the top 25, or that's going to be, even without it, there's still going to be a discussion point along those lines when the commissioners get together.
Well, and I think it was that was one of the more interesting things in terms of kind of the end of the bottom 25, if you will, is not seeing North Texas there. You know, they are ranked in the AP.
Right.
You know, I think they're 2021 right now in the AP. So there's a bit of difference there. But North Texas, I mean, they could finish 12-1. I think they would obviously be ranked next week if they end up making it to the American championship game, given the number of losses some of those teams at the bottom from 20 to 25 could end up taking this weekend. So I do think the American's going to be in the top 25. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think they're maybe, James Madison appears suddenly at the the bottom of the rankings next week to also maybe give some intrigue to conference championship weekend and have some interest there in the Sun Belt title game a little bit as well, which they are hosting. The only team that has locked up an actual bid this week going into the conference title game weekend is James Madison. So, kudos to the Dukes. And they're another team, honestly, that you could probably talk about in terms of their head coach potentially leaving in the middle of the playoff run as well. So a lot of factors to consider for the committee. But, I think that they've kind of undervalued, the group of five in general compared to certainly the poll voters. But I think the committee has pretty consistently said, all right, we're going to value wins. The group of five doesn't really have them. We're going to debate them, and we're going to have them at the end of the rankings, come Selection Sunday. But that's about all we're going to do. They try to punt that decision. Seems like every single year to the very last moment that they can. It's not saying that those teams aren't worthy, but I mean this year. I mean, could you imagine, if North Texas had to go on the road to Lubbock, and the Eric Morris special, if you will, if North Texas went to the American, to go to Texas Tech, a future conference coach now in Eric Morris, playing at his alma mater, like a lot of those North Texas kids, they're from that state. They probably would, probably a third of them are, probably grew up Texas Tech fans, or at least seeing the Red Raiders throw the ball over the yard and have some success, and have Patrick Mahomes going to school there and putting up crazy numbers. The shootout that game could turn into there in Lubbock could be a fun game. That could be a fun playoff game. And yeah, you expect Texas Tech to win given their dominance in the trenches, but that would be a pretty fun playoff game. Just like I think if Tulane were in the same spot with Jake Retzlaff running around. So those group of five teams, yes, it was difficult. I think everything has been skewed by the fact that Boise got a top 4 seed last year, but these could be competitive games if given the chance.
I'd like to stick up a little bit for the American. Just they did some good work in the non-conference schedule. I mean, Tulane thumped Northwestern, who was 6-5 and 4-4 in the Big Ten. Beat them by 20. Tulane beat Duke, which is still mathematically alive in the ACC. I mean, they did some good things. South Florida won in the swamp before Florida had completely fallen apart. Memphis beat Arkansas. So I don't look at the American and say that league just couldn't produce a champion that wouldn't be competitive. I think it absolutely could produce a competitive champion. I'm not saying they're going to win a first round game. They're definitely going to be a 12 seed. They're definitely going to be people playing on the road against a 5. It won't be easy, but I think they will have earned a spot. And that's the one thing I don't want to hear. They're undeserving, the group of 5. So, all right, that's enough soapboxing for tonight. Thanks for joining us, Bryan Fischer, Pat Forde. Be sure to check out Others Receiving Votes with Gene Wojciechowski as well, our podcast. We taped this morning. A lot of talk about Lane Kiffin, a lot of talk about the rivalry games, some Mike Norvell, some Chip Kelly, some picks. So please be sure to listen to all that. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.